So the international break is finally over. So we're back to it with another press conference from Arne Slot. He's been here at the AXA Training Centre today previewing Liverpool's game against Nottingham Forest at Anfield this Saturday. And as ever, I was there to hear from the manager, hear what he had to say ahead of this game. And I think the best place to start, this place we usually start, is the team news. And of course, a little bit of a blow for Liverpool. You will have heard over the course of the last week, which is that Harvey Elliott faces at least a month out with a fractured foot. He sustained it on international duty, or it was reported on international duty. It's my understanding that he's maybe been carrying that for a little bit, for a little while, been maybe playing through the pain a little. Obviously, it's got to the point where they've needed to do something about it. And as I say, facing, as far as I understand, at least a month out. So that's a real blow for Liverpool. So, of course, Arne Slot was asked about that and said, no getting away from it is a blow for Liverpool. It's a blow for the player himself as well, because obviously Harvey Elliott, we hadn't seen an awful lot of him so far this season, but he did say that he was exceptional in pre-season and looked like he'd be a really good fit. And in this busy period that is coming up, Arne Slot said that he would have played an awful lot of games, but unfortunately not going to be available in this period. So, as he says, a blow for the player and a blow for Liverpool too. So, an unfortunate one. And Slot, you could see his clear disappointment around that one. Now, it's not all bad news on the injury front. A real boost, actually, this one, I think. Alexis McAllister is fit and is going to be available to face Nottingham Forest. Now, you will remember he missed the final Argentina game of the international break with a little bit of an issue that apparently had been managing through the international break. So, a little bit of concern there that maybe he'd missed it because the injury had flared up and maybe that was going to cause him to miss Liverpool games. But it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. Arne Slot said that McAllister trained on Thursday. He will, of course, train today, and it looks like everything is okay and that he expects him to be in the squad to face Nottingham Forest. So a real boost on that front. And just to wrap up the team news as well, we are, of course, waiting for Federico Chiesa to make his debut. Obviously wasn't in the squad to face Manchester United, didn't quite have the fitness to be ready for that. Will he be in contention for this game against Nottingham Forest is the big question now. Arne Slot has said that Chiesa had been training with the 21s, hadn't he, during the international break. He's also now trained 3 or 4 times with the first team squad, so he's been in and around training. He's doing everything he can to make himself available. But Arne Slot very cagey on whether he's going to be part of the squad or not to face Nottingham Forest. He said he had a decision to make here, and which is, do I pick my squad based on the positions I need and the areas I need, or do I just pick the players who are the most fit, the ones who've got the strongest fitness? So that's the decision for him to make here in this one in terms of whether Chiesa is involved or not. I would contest that a home game against Nottingham Forest, it's maybe not about naming your fittest players. It's maybe about, if Nottingham Forest frustrate Liverpool in any way, having that firepower on the bench to change things. Someone like Chiesa who can change a game, maybe he's the better option in that situation. But we will have to see what the manager does on that front and whether Chiesa is involved and whether he's able to get that debut. Fingers crossed we do see a little bit of him, because obviously very excited to see what he can do in a Liverpool shirt. Now, moving away from team news, we'll talk about contracts now. Of course, it comes up in every press conference at the moment that Trent Alexander-Arnold, Mohamed Salah and Virgil van Dijk has still not signed extensions to the contracts which expire at the end of this season. And this press conference was no different. He was asked about that again, and as ever, absolutely cagey as you would expect on it. Doesn't want to give anything away in terms of whether there's been any progress on those contracts or any talks in those situations. So no real update on that one, unfortunately. And he was also asked, is this a distraction at the moment? But again, kind of batted that one away and suggested that, look, his main focus is on the team, is on the individual players and ensuring the best conditions that they can keep winning football matches. So not something he is really thinking about at the moment. So I don't think we're going to hear any updates in terms of whether anything moves on that from the manager himself. I think it is going to, we'll eventually see it leak out through people like me, journalists and people like that. I think that's where we'll see the first updates, and then we will get the official confirmation. So hopefully we start to hear some movement on that. I haven't really heard anything around the contracts at the moment, hoping to hear updates in the coming weeks and months, but we really do need to see progress on that soon, because that end of the season will sneak up on you. So hopefully Liverpool can get some progress made on those ones. Now, Talking about players' futures, you will have seen the Caoimhin Kelleher quote over the international break, where he effectively said that he is still very, very keen to leave Liverpool to go and play first team football. He said it's not all completely in my hands. Obviously, Liverpool rejected a pretty derisory bid really from Nottingham Forest late in the transfer window, and really a surprise to me that interest wasn't greater in someone like Caoimhin Kelleher, seeing how good he is. But he was speaking very openly and very honestly about the fact that he still does want to leave Liverpool and go and play more regularly. Now, Slot was asked about this and said, look, is this anything that concerns you? Are you worried about the fact that you've got a player in your squad that's kind of shown that he's quite desperate to leave and is very keen to do so? And I thought his answer was very good on this. I wrote the quote out for this one. He said, look, I'll be really worried if a player comes out and says, I don't care about playing first team football. I like it so much on the bench. I want to stay there for the rest of my life. So he said, look, I'm very, very happy with Caoimhin and the way he's played and the way he's training at the moment. No real concerns about that. He expects at a club of this size that you're always going to have players who want to play regularly, even though they're not doing, because you always have such good options in your squad. And he said, last year and also even in pre-season under him, he noticed that Caoimhin Kelleher, whenever he was called upon, absolutely did his job. So he's got no concerns about that one, and no worries that Caoimhin Kelleher is showing his desire to leave. He just thinks that that's one that's going to rumble on in the background constantly, but no doubts about the player's commitment. We will have to see, of course, how that plays out in terms of going into January. Does anyone come in for him? Or if it makes it to next summer, and he, again, if that interest really ramps up in him, we will have to see. Now, another area he was asked about, I thought was really interesting, is the fact that Liverpool have got a very, very busy schedule coming up. It's 3 games in just 21 days across the Premier League, the League Cup, and of course the Champions League gets started as well. So it's a real challenge for him. And I actually interestingly wrote about this topic this week on my Substack. The link to that is, of course, in the description to this video as ever. And if you haven't checked it out, please do that. It's David Lynch, LFC.substack.com. All my best stuff is on there, all my reporting, all the news. And I did write about this topic on there, actually, about the fact that this is a really new challenge for Slot. I looked at the season when Feyenoord went deep in the Europa Conference League. They did get to the final that season, and I noticed that between those games, he actually averaged a change from Europa Conference League game to the Eredivisie game that followed. He averaged just 1 change per game, which is really, really low. So he was using very much a similar 11 or starting 11 across those games from game to game, despite it being midweek weekend. Now, of course, my expectation is that's going to be a bigger challenge for him to do that at Liverpool. I think very unlikely, in fact, that he's going to be able to do that, because the fact is you've got the League Cup thrown in there, which isn't a thing in Holland. They only have like a similar competition to the FA Cup. So you've got the League Cup in there as well, which Liverpool, of course, will want to defend and want to do well in. There's more Champions League games this season. There are 4 extra Premier League games, and also the Premier League itself is a more intense league. So I think Arne Slot is really going to have to use his squad in this period. And he was asked about this, and interestingly, he kind of agreed with what I'd written, which obviously is always very, very pleasing when you're a journalist, and said that he is going to have to approach it in a slightly different way and work with his medical and performance staff to see who's ready. And he's not going to be able to maybe do what he did at Feyenoord in terms of approaching it and trying to get the same 11 out there constantly. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And I am, of course, absolutely fascinated to see how he manages that challenge. I mean, this first week now going into it with the midweek games coming up, really, really interested to see what his starting 11 is in the Premier League, what he goes for in Europe, how many changes he can make, how many changes he feels he can make, how he uses his squad, who gets games. It's really, really interesting to see how he does that and how he faces that challenge, because that, as good as a start as he's had as a Liverpool manager, I think how he approaches this challenge is going to have a huge say really in how successful he is at Liverpool. So really, really interesting one coming up. Now, of course, just to finish up, he did talk about Ryan Gravenberch, but he always talks about Ryan Gravenberch at the moment. We always talk about him. I'm sure I will be talking about him after tomorrow's game, so maybe leave this bit out, and I will just leave you to say that, of course, I will be at Anfield for Saturday's game. Very much looking forward to being back there after the international break and seeing how Liverpool, if they can keep up that momentum that they got. Really, really excited for that one. And as ever, I'm going to ask if you can like and subscribe, always massively appreciated. And of course, I mentioned it earlier, but if you can check out the Substack, the link is below this video in the description there. So really appreciate anyone who could have a look at that. And as I say, we'll be back for the Nottingham Forest game. So I'll see you guys very, very soon.